And it's got to be tough because I remember I never been to New York actually, but we see a lot of the old movies. I remember those old Martin Scorsese movies like King of Comedy and After Hours, and now Joker really depicts a really old type of New York City that was much darker. Am I right? So it's like there was a lot of criminality, a lot of stuff. I know that you were in a couple of gang fights. What happened, man?
Well, yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that till you mentioned it. The Joker did depict the dark side of New York. Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that because The Last Dragon was like the light side, how you can see how fun the '80s was.
Yeah, it's like a cartoon picture of New York at the time, right? And
right, but crime was very high.
Yeah, and I realized that a lot of video games that I used to play, not Street Fighter, but I remember Streets of Rage and Final Fight, were always depicting stuff that really looked like The Last Dragon. So I guess you guys made it big. I mean, you guys were a cultural icon of what happened next, and that was so... that was so fun to watch back then. But yeah, it was a lighter side of what was actually happening in the darker side of New York, right?
Yeah, I ended up going through a lot with the powers that be and the Hollywood machine and Berry Gordy and all that. But if I look at the positive side of that, I do see this as a pivotal film in that era. If you think about film before The Last Dragon with people of color. They were very one-dimensional. Black men were always these bad guys that were courageous and heroic and very cool, but they were very violent. They carried guns and they killed the bad guys, and it was a lot of black exploitation, black-on-black crime. And white people were the people you couldn't trust, And The Last Dragon was an attempt to show how we're all human,
Yeah.
and show that a person of color that is black can play a humble character that doesn't have to use a gun to kill everybody,
Yeah, and it's the main character, which was always something new at the time as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so when this film came out, it was very cutting edge because they never depicted characters like this way. Very about a spiritual side of martial arts and layered in a landscape of comedy, and it was cutting edge musically, and also with the culture of being black, Latino, white. The tragedy in it is that when the movie came out, TriStar at the time didn't promote it to any other group than the black audience because they didn't see this as a film that every race would love. And here we are, so many years later. I've made appearances where fans were all white in the audiences, everywhere from, I did appearance in Roanoke, Virginia, Seattle. It was 90% white fans, So it just goes to show you how that limited way of thinking and getting stuck inside this box of labels and tribes stops art from getting out to people.
Yeah, it just comes to show that
because
sometimes...
it went up to number 2 in the country. It went up to number 2 in the country, then immediately fell out.
Yeah, I know that
lack of promotion.
It grossed. It was done on something like $10 million, and it grossed like 26 million. So, and it's funny that you said something like in another interview, which I saw, you said something like only when it reached TV with HBO or something did people start to notice it, and people loved it. So sometimes it comes to show that we live in a box, and sometimes we want to do stuff and think, oh no, this is just for that audience. I remember another quick.
It was more the powers that be, though.
Oh, yeah.
You and I understand, but if you think about the people that control the media, right?
Yeah.
They're trying to sell to an audience.
Yeah, they always want to segment and segment. Yeah.
This was a completely different time. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
they were afraid to sell this film depicting my character as a humble person of color. You know that this people would not absorb that. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it was a
Yeah.
mistake. It was a mistake. You know, because obviously they do. And, you know, they underestimate the you know, the heart of a human being. You know, a human being obviously isn't perfect, but when you put a meal out and it's tasty, they forget about that maybe you know, like a kid, I don't like greens, and you cover it up, and then they realize, oh, I like greens, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
they, you know what I mean.